you need to make sure when you're running your practice, you're the leader. And leaders don't really micromanage. They inspire others to lead within their own area of expertise.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry look like to you? I'm Katie Polson, a dental hygienist and your host.
Hi, everyone. This is a Growth in Dentistry podcast. My name is Steve Jensen, a total dental nerd, and I am your host today. Super excited for our guest, Ella with Converge Dental. Now, I'm going to give my own little introduction. I'm going to let her tell you about herself a little bit. But here's what I love about Ella. Her and Tanya are two partners in this consulting firm, and they have combined 30 plus years of experience in the industry between hygiene and practice management. And they saw this big problem for them to go solve, or this gap to be filled. Dental practice owners are so busy. They are so focused on running the business and owning the business, but also on actually being the main provider in the practice, completing dentistry, taking care of patients. And one of the things that they noticed is these owners needed help with having a model, a system that they could implement to take a lot of that off of their plate so they could focus on helping the patients and doing best by their teams. And so I'm really excited today to talk with Ella about some of the things they're doing at Converge Dental and some of the principles they're applying that are helping practices really level up and transform the business into less of a reactive model and more of a proactive model about the way that they run their business. So Ella, super excited to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about Converge Dental, and then we'll jump in and start talking shop.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction, Steve. That was amazing. Yes, as you mentioned, Tanya, unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us today, but Tanya and I have come up with this concept because we've been in dentistry for such a long time, and we have had the pleasure of helping our practices grow and transform from where we started with them to all the way to where before we left those practices. But that is the main thing we've noticed. Dentists love what they do. But unfortunately, because there were so many hats and they have to manage every aspect of the practice, it is challenging to come every day with a smile and that motivation to motivate the team. So Tanya and I have come together and thought, hey, how can we make it easier for dentists to make sure that they can do the dentistry that they love doing without the headache of managing the practice? Now, they do still have to manage. They are the lead.
That almost sounded like you're pitching a DSO, which is not what's going on here, right?
No. They still have to manage the practice, but how can we simplify the process for them? And that's where we came with Converge Dental was born because of that thought. And we have a beautiful model practice, or you can think of a business in a box for the dentist to implement those best practices, have their team aligned, and deliver that exceptional customer experience consistently. And yet at the end, they can breathe and watch their practice grow.
I love that. And I love the term business in a box. I just imagined us in this podcast today. We'll open up that box, take a little peek on what we've got inside, and share some of those gifts with everybody. So let's start at the foundation. So you and I talked a little bit before in preparation, and I want one of the things we're going to talk about today at the beginning that sets a foundation for everything else is the maturity model for a business. And this isn't necessarily like dentistry specific, but will you share a little bit about what that maturity model is? Because you guys have this goal to transform businesses, but in order to transform something, you need to know like where it's at and where it can go. So will you talk us a little bit like high level about what the maturity model is and that perception you guys have or that vision you have for transforming dental practices?
Of course. So maturity model, if you can envision stair steps, right? You have step 1 all the way to step 4. And so we are able to identify where the practice stands. Step 1 is where the practice is in a chaos. The chaos means that there's no written rules, responsibilities for the employees. There's no processes or tools or techniques or training for that matter. The practice just goes on daily basis as it does, and it's very reactive situations all the time. Micromanagement on the dentist aspect as well. So that's level 1, where you have a level 4, the transformation that happens where you have a practice with systems, processes, best practices performed on a daily basis, where the patient is the primary focus of the whole experience of the practice. But the most important transformation here in that level is when the practice actually utilizes data and analytics and is able to utilize that information to make the transformation of practice even further to where they are, right? So, and everything in between, and that takes the steps from level 1 of chaos to level 4, where you have that maturity. How do we get and transform the clients or the practices from those levels going up the stairs?
That's brilliant. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking about, so I've been at Dental Intel for like the last 5 years. And some people are like, software is probably not like the same as dental practice, but we're honestly, as business owners, as business leaders, all going through a lot of the same stuff. And even just in the last couple of years, we've had this big focus where, like, early on as a startup, we could rely on what I'll call like heroes and heroics, right? Like a few charismatic people with a vision could have a lot of impact early on. But as we grew as a company, we had to stop. And that, by the way, will like burn those people out. Like if a business is reliant on humans and heroics, then when anything goes wrong, it's going to fall back on those people that are willing to be the hero, instead of having like a clear process that's repeatable, right? So we've had to move from being reliant on heroes and heroics to processes and tools, or something else you mentioned, like we needed to be, this is funny as an analytics company, but we needed to focus less on like gut feelings and what we think is going to help the business versus being data driven. Like, can we actually show, here's the thing that we changed and here was the business impact that it had? And that has really helped us as a business be far more confident in like our future and stability. And then other things, like instead of relying on hope, relying on actual like execution and predictability. And so I'm excited. Like, I love the maturity model. And I think that even if you're a small dental practice, sometimes people will think like, well, I'm not like a big software company like Dental Intelligence, or I'm not like a big group or a big like humming practice. But man, if you can learn, or at least learn from us, take some of these lessons that happen with scale and apply them to your simple bit, like your smaller business. I shouldn't say simple, it's not simple. Your smaller business, you can really take a lot of that burden off your shoulders, because the habit's going to be all focused on heroes and heroics. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, for sure, we can set up, you know, like you said, a model practice or a practice, you know, a practice in a box. So, okay, so let me look here next. Oh, so go ahead. You sound like you had a comment.
You have to understand one concept where the world is moving to, right? We have new business models nowadays where the focus primarily is the customer or the patient in our case, where it has not been before. So the idea with us and what Tanya and I are doing, it's not so much what we used to do as traditional coaching and consulting. This is transformational coaching. You have all these new technologies coming in. How do we get those practices to understand that there is a lot of fear about implementing, technology, right? Because they're like, oh, the unknown. So how do you help the practices feel comfortable? Even you don't have to go all the way to the top level of the maturity, but the transitions to be able to utilize the new technology that's coming out in this world nowadays. So we got to stay with this transformation and move forward to make sure you see your vision come true.
Yeah, I love that. So let's start then transitioning. So conceptually, this idea. So we've got these steps in this maturity model. We want to grow our practice in maturity, right? So that it's more predictable. I have to like worry less as a doctor. My team can take on some of that responsibility because I've created something that works well with everyone, right? That system and process. Yeah. So tell me more. So let's open the box. What are some of those like essential concepts or principles that drive transformation? Like, where do we start?
That's a great question. So the first thing is we do like the discovery sessions, right? Identify where does a practice stand, what is available and what works now, what might need a little tweaking here and there, and then what actually needs to be changed at this point. So the model practice, for example, it's a patient-centric idea where the best practices and processes are predefined. And you have the tools, techniques, and everything that you need to be able to just read, implement, execute, and see the difference in your practice. So no longer do businesses or my businesses might need to find time to sit down and do certain, figuring out how to write a process, what looks right, what looks wrong, and then spend all that time and it might take years for some offices to do, no longer that time needs to be spent on that. The time should be more focused on implementing certain things to make sure that the practices are growing in the right direction. So the first step is to identify, where does your practice stand? Once you identify where you are, then we can start implementing certain things. For example, with every employee understanding what are their roles, what are the responsibilities, and most importantly, expectations of the roles. Once the employee understands how their performance on a daily basis impacts the customer experience, team efficiency and productivity, and the bottom line of the practice in general, that's when you have employees that work together in harmony as a team that can consistently deliver that exceptional customer experience. That's what's going to provide the practices the ability to create loyal brand ambassadors, allow the practice to grow organically, reduce the marketing costs sometimes, and make sure that they, from that point on, they can now transform to the next level of the maturity model to improve their vision or increase their vision that they would like to do.
No, I love that. So what I'm hearing is we're going to look at where we're at as a business, and then the ultimate outcome is, hey, let's have essentially a handbook or a model that explains and helps describe, so if there's turnover, what each team member role is, what their responsibilities are, and then how do they even know if they're successful, right? You hinted at measuring success and knowing what that looks like, which is a key element of that, obviously. And then I think you also hinted at some training elements, we will need to train team members and up-level them, or if we have some new team members, obviously training them. And then there's one other thing that you had mentioned to me in preparation, and that's what you called the 5 areas of a patient life cycle. That's one of the concepts you guys use to analyze a business. So tell us more about what that concept is.
Sure. Customer experience, as I mentioned earlier, customer experience nowadays is the key and it's the most important aspect of business. That's why everything else has to line up in order to provide the exceptional customer experience. So identifying the key touch points where the customer interaction happens and optimizing those points is the most important part. Making sure that every employee has the soft skills and clearly can communicate to the patients, educate them to make sure that they can understand what their where their health stands right now. What kind of decisions do they need to make? It is the clinician's responsibility to educate patients so they can make educated decisions for themselves. So making sure, and for example, we have 5 key touch points where from intake of a patient, what is that first interaction over the phone with the initial patient, right? Is it with a smile? What's the tone of voice that they receive? What is the posture of the receptionist who picked up the phone? And then as the patient comes in during the assessment, how comprehensive of the assessment is provided. And then on education, how clear is that education that patient understands exactly where they stand, exactly what they need to do to optimize their own health, right? And all the way up to the treatment and retention. Retention is the key to make sure that all that hard work per se from the dental team and the marketing people to make sure patients are coming in, that we're maintaining those patients in the practice. But the key is not just maintaining. You want those patients to bring in more patients and grow the practice organically.
Yeah, I love that. And so if you're listening, I don't know if you caught this, but she just did outline these 5 areas, I think. So tell me if I'm wrong, because I was taking notes while you were saying them. So what I heard was we've got 5, right? So first is our intake, that initial experience with the patient. And we are probably going to want okay, who on the team is responsible for that? And what are their interactions like? What does excellence look like there? And then we move into, once they're in, that initial assessment with the patient, right? So they're back in the chair, we're doing an assessment, we've identified, x-rays, things like that. Who's responsible? What does a great experience look like? And how do we measure success? And then we have to educate the patient on why they need what we've diagnosed. I think that's the third. And then you said, actually completing the treatment, right? So we actually have to do the treatment on the patient. What is that experience like? They've come back. What is the, getting back to the chair? How do we set expectations for what's going to happen? How long are they going to stay numb? Whatever. And not whatever, but you get the idea, and on and on. And then finally, as they're going through this these touch points. The last one is retention, but like you said, not just retention, but we also want to make sure that fifth one, that our retention efforts are providing such a high level experience that we've got patients who love us so much that they'll tell other people, you've got to go see, Dr. Ella, or, whichever practice that you're in. And as we can really hone in on those 5 areas, so intake, assessment, education, treatment, and retention, those 5, those are going to really give us this full picture of what's going on with the patient. But then also we'll start outlining, how do we manage the different team members to each of those 5 different interactions we're having. That sound right?
So as we mentioned, the model practice from before, the model practice exactly addresses those areas and gives you the predefined best practices. So every employee can look at our role-based job aids. They're visual, very simple to use. And then they can say, okay, this is how I need to perform, or what needs to be done to make sure the transitions are smooth. How do you do a handoff? That's super important. Say from the hygienist to the doctor, or the hygienist bringing the patient up to the front to the receptionist. What does that handoff look like? If that handoff is broken, patient might not schedule for the next treatment. You never know. So practice provides just that.
In fact, since you just gave that example, let me just share this. So one of the cool things that we're tracking in dental intelligence is what we call like a treatment team. So I think intuitively, let me share this example, and then I'll come back to like dental nerding for a little bit. So, and I might botch these days, but the idea is sound. Okay. So in the car world, when they're manufacturing cars, I'm pretty sure I have the dates right. So I think cars that are manufactured on Fridays are way more likely to have recalls and problems than cars that are manufactured on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So like, Ella, why would that be, do you think?
People might be tired.
Yes, people,
I'm thinking of.
They want to check out. So the point I'm trying to make is that there are like these circumstances that we can or can't control that can have an impact on like the business outcomes we're doing. So in a dental practice, even something as simple as what I'm going to call a treatment team. So the hygienist is involved, an assistant could be involved, and a doctor can be involved, even a treatment coordinator, front desk, like they're all this treatment team. But one of the things that we measure is, does a hygienist, so let's say it's a traditional case, they come in for a hygiene cleaning, we do the x-rays, and the doctor's going to come do an exam. Does the hygienist have an impact? Which hygienist? So let's say there's like 3 or 4 hygienists, it's a little bigger practice. Does the hygienist have an impact on first, the doctor's diagnostic percentage, and then second, the case acceptance of that patient to say yes to something, and then third, the total dollars presented, the actual completion of the case? And I think people would like intuitively be like, yeah, they probably do, but I don't know what it is, but we measure that, and they have a dramatic impact, different hygienists. So in one practice, you might have a hygienist and a doctor that see 10% higher diagnostic and 10% higher case acceptance, where a different hygienist, it's lower diagnostic percentage and lower case acceptance. So yes, when we have a system and we can start measuring and then we can start training people, like, man, we can have a big impact. So let's start getting into some of the nuts and bolts. So we've got kind of this concept. We've got the 5 touch points of a patient life cycle. We understand that we want to start creating like some very clear paths for our team members. Like, what are you responsible for? How do you measurement? What does measure it? What does excellence look like? So will you talk me through maybe some use cases with implementation? Like, what are some of the common things you see where you're like, hey, we love training practices on this, and it can have a big impact on leveling up the business? And like, where do we start? Give us some like pearls of wisdom.
Funny you asked this question, because for me personally, it's seeing the transformation all the way around, because we take that patient life cycle and we look at that whole patient life cycle and to see where does the practice stand in each one of the aspects. The bigger part, I mean, it all comes into it. Each area of the practice impact the bottom line, right? So we love working with the front office personnel, the receptionist, on the soft skills, the presentation, the organization aspect for sure, because just like the dentist, the front office receptionist has a lot of hats to wear, especially if it's a smaller practice. They are scheduling coordinator, they are treatment plan coordinator, they are their receptionist, and they do the phone calls, check insurance, all of that in one person. So when we work with smaller practices, we help them organize to make sure they understand their ideal day. What does that look like for them? How do they manage to make sure they're on top of everything and they're not forgetting to follow up on the phone call or, do a treatment plan and schedule certain things. So we really truly enjoy working with the receptionist. And then the other aspect is the clinical team, educating them on how to use the art of communication. How do you educate patients to make sure that they understand the importance of taking charge of their own health? It's not more like you got to do this and the patients understand, oh, the dentist is making money off of me. It's more you are showing these signs. You probably should take these steps to better yourself and your health. And that's when patients create that relationship, that rapport with the clinician to make sure that they feel like they're being taken care of, that they're heard, and that the suggestions that are being made is because it's what they need, not because of upselling or something different. We love working with hygienists as a restorative dental partner with a dentist. You mentioned a little statistic before of how does it make sure that the numbers are showing that the treatment presentation from the hygiene chair is a little bit higher from one office to the other. It's all about understanding that what is a restorative dental partner. If you have a hygienist that understands what her position is in the dental practice as a partner with the dentist, not somebody that just works with the dentist, she is the dental partner to the dentist. That's when the treatment plan acceptance rates goes up, because they're both diagnosing. The hygienist prepares the patient way before the dentist comes in for the checkup. The patient already heard what the dentist might talk about. And when the patient hears things 3 times, that's when it actually checks in and says, you know what? That's what the hygienist mentioned. The doctor could reconfirmed. And now I'm hearing the same thing here at the handoff in the front. I probably should schedule my appointment treatment. So it's, again, you mentioned our favorite part. It's all of it, to be honest with you. There's no one particular aspect that we enjoy, but what we do enjoy is the fulfillment at the end when we watch the practices grow. We watch the dentists see their vision come true and continuously come true. And especially when you have tools where you take away the aspect where it's more of a feeling and I'm not sure, but it feels right, but you actually have data to show you the transformation that you've been working so hard to get to. That's when it comes to like, wow, we have done it together as partners, and we help this practice grow and transform to maturity level on the model to 3 or 4, whatever the vision is for the practice.
I love that. And I love the phrase for a hygienist as a dental partner. Like, that's such a thoughtful way to think about that role, because that's really what they are, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to give the audience pearls. So like, tell me what's some advice for a hygienist or a doctor to improve, I don't know, case acceptance or the handoff. Like, give us some practical advice. And then what's some advice that you might give to a front office team? So reveal a little bit of some of your secret sauce here on like best practices.
Practice, I would say, for the dentist is to take the role of a leader. Practices need leaders. There are dentists have some dentists have the personality of they just want to do what they want to do and not deal with everything else. We've seen that, and we've seen the opposite as well. But you need to make sure when you're running your practice, you're the leader. And leaders don't really micromanage. They inspire others to lead within their own area of expertise. They come to you when things, certain levels of things have happened, and they still need that leader to finally answer certain questions because they have not been resolved. That's when the leader comes into play. But everything else is in place, and she or he positioned themselves as a leader. That's the big thing for the dentist. For the hygienist, the important part is understand your role. You're not just there to clean teeth. Your role is to be the restorative dental partner, help the practice grow, help educate the patients so they can understand what's important to them, and be a good part of the team to make sure that everybody's on the same level, which is our idea is to make sure patients have good customer experience. That's all that matters at the end. The clinical team, Assistants, same thing. They're also there as restorative dental partners. What they talk to patients before the doctor comes in makes a big difference, right? If they just chit chat there about the day and whatnot, versus, you had some treatment that was proposed before. How do you feel about moving on to take care of the issues and whatnot? So the importance of building relationships and building rapport is super important for the clinical team. And that at the end increases the treatment acceptance rates for sure, because it creates that safety for patients. They feel like they're being heard and they're truly being taken care of.
Before I let you move on to the front office, so something that, and I may share this like too much, but I'm such a big believer. One of the rules that my wife and I have for our family, and it's this belief that investment in yourself is always worth it. So like when it comes to like our pocketbooks and our wallets, like we will always invest in ourselves. That's our health, our mental health, like physical things, our education. We just have this rule that, we only get like one brain, one body, one set of teeth. I guess technically 2 sets of teeth, but once we hit like 12 years old, 13 years old, we only get the one for the rest of life. And
right.
It's important, I think, it's important for this clinical team to help infuse a lot of that belief in their patients, right? Like there are so many people, like we live in this crazy marketing consumeristic world that's like trying to convince everyone that their thing is the most important thing that they could potentially buy or invest in: phones and computers and toys and, fun. And man, like as a clinical team, if you can just help infuse a belief in the world and in patients that investments in ourselves, in our body, in our mind, holistically, is the best approach to life, so we can like enjoy life to the fullest without any pain or minimal amounts of pain. Like that is going to do such a huge service by our patients. And then when we present treatment, it's not about dollars as much as it is like care and taking care of people. So I love that that's your approach. My own spin on what you just said, but I love that approach. So now give some advice to front office team. Like what are some tips on best practices for the front office team?
The best practices, I would say, there's a lot, but one of the most important thing is they are the face of the practice, right? They are the first ones that the patients hear or see. How they present themselves is very important. So when you come to work, make sure you are smiling every time you pick up the phone, or just you have that positive energy within. Your tone of voice, your posture, your ability to communicate all comes from how you present yourself. No matter what happens at home, no matter what happens out of the practice, when you step into that practice, just make sure you transform your mindset and your facial expressions are totally showing what you're feeling, which is love for your patients and love for being there at the practice to serve what you should be doing.
I went to, it just made me think, I had this like flashback. So like 4 years ago, I went to Disney World. They do like a customer service, customer success training type thing. And one of the things that like stuck out to me, and in some ways I was like, oh, that like feels a little fake, but like, I love the concept, is have you ever heard what they call their team members? They don't call them team members or staff or whatever. Do you know what they call them? They're all actors, which some people, because like I said, might feel a little fake. But the part that I really like is that they have backstage and then they have on stage, right? So whenever team members are behind the scenes, which means anyone that's in Disney World or Disneyland can't see them, then they're considered off stage. They can relax, they can frown if they want to, they can cry, but you go on stage. So meaning you go like customer facing or, visitor facing, then we are on stage now. Like it's our responsibility. Like we want to brighten everyone's day here in this place. We want to make sure that when they come in, they feel this good energy and it isn't like a downer part of the day. And I like that perception of like, I know it's a healthcare practice and like that people have fears about going to the dentist and surveys and stuff. But like, if we can help make it feel more welcoming when they come in, and maybe it's like an on stage mentality. I love that. So I love that you encourage smiles and warmth as people come in, because it makes a difference. It really does in people's day. So let me finish with this question. Great conversation today, Ella. What does growth in dentistry mean to you? It's something that we ask every single one of our guests.
Get back to how we started the conversation. The growth in dentistry for us, for Tanya and I, and Converge Dental, it means that we are able to move the practices and transform the practices to the new business models nowadays where the practices are able to optimize their performance by utilizing the technology that is available to them and making sure that their vision comes true and making sure that every team member is happy to be where they are. So when you have everything in place and the foundation is there and the dentist is the leader of the practice to help the vision come true, that's the true transformation and success in that dental practice for us.
What a great answer. Well, thank you, Ella, for joining. I'm sure people are probably wondering, like, hey, if you want to follow up with Ella, want to connect with her, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Please go to our website. It's convergedental.com, or you can email us at contact@convergedental.com.
Okay, cool.